Somewhere in a museum vault in Berlin, there's a 5,000-year-old clay tablet that shouldn't exist. Not because it's old. Old tablets are common. It shouldn't exist because of what's written on it, a star map. Drawn by a civilization that had no telescopes, no satellites, no way, by any accepted timeline of human development, to know what it knew. And buried inside that star map is a name, Nibiru. The ancient Sumerians called it the planet of the crossing. They said it was the home of the gods who made us. And they said something else, something that NASA-funded astronomers are, right now, quietly trying to prove or disprove with the most powerful telescope ever built. They said it comes back. Stick with me to the end, because the last 10 minutes of this video connect a 5,000-year-old prophecy to a live scientific search happening in Chile right now. And the math is closer than you think. Before we talk about a mystery planet, we have to talk about the people who first wrote its name down, because the real mystery starts with them. Around 3200 BC, in the marshy floodplains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, something happened that has no clean explanation. A culture appeared, the Sumerians, and within a few centuries, they weren't just farming and building. They were tracking the sky with a level of precision that historians still argue about. They mapped the phases of Venus across a 21-year cycle, with numbers that hold up under modern recalculation. They worked out the Saros cycle, the 18-year rhythm that governs solar eclipses, a level of predictive astronomy that Europe wouldn't match again until the Renaissance, nearly 4,000 years later. And it doesn't stop at the planets you can see with your bare eyes. Sumerian and later Babylonian texts describe what reads like a full accounting of the solar system, including references many researchers connect to the outer planets. Bodies that are, by every conventional rule of naked-eye astronomy, supposed to be invisible without a lens. Mainstream historians have an answer for this, and it's a fair one. Centuries of patient observation, passed down and refined generation after generation, can produce extraordinary results without any outside help. Human beings are capable of remarkable things when they stare at the same sky long enough. That explanation works for the moon, for the visible planets, for eclipse cycles built on repetition. Where it gets shakier is the outer solar system, the level of specific detail attributed to bodies that shouldn't have been observable at all. That's the gap mainstream scholarship still hasn't fully closed. And the Sumerians themselves never claimed they figured it out through patient study. They said they were taught. The word for their teachers was Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. They show up everywhere in the oldest religious literature on Earth.
Sumerians,
In the Atrahasis
behold,
epic, one
I
of
am
the oldest
Enlil
surviving
Asher,
written narratives
son of
in
the
human
God
history,
King.
the Anunnaki
We shall
arrive on
guide
Earth
you.
and set up operations. Beneath them are lesser beings, the Igigi, assigned to the brutal labor of a new world, digging canals, working mines, keeping the infrastructure running. Eventually, the story goes, the Igigi had enough. They rebelled, and the solution the Anunnaki came up with wasn't mercy. It was engineering. They created humanity not as a beloved creation, but as a workforce. A replacement laborer, built to do the job the lesser gods refused to keep doing. Sit with that for a second. This isn't a warm creation myth about a god lovingly shaping people from clay out of love. This is the oldest civilization on Earth telling you point blank that humans were built to solve a labor shortage. Two names matter most in this story: Enlil and Enki, sons of the Anunnaki leader Anu. Enlil is the hardliner. In the Sumerian flood narrative, centuries older than the Bible's version, it's Enlil who decides humanity has become too loud, too numerous, too unruly, and needs to be erased. He sends the flood. Enki is the one who breaks ranks. He warns a man named Zeusudra in secret. Build a vessel, survive, save what you can. If that story sounds familiar, it should. This is the root of the flood myth that would eventually become the story of Noah, recorded by the Sumerians 1,000 years before Genesis was written down. What's consistent across every one of these texts is this: the Anunnaki are never described as abstract gods living in some metaphorical heaven. They're described as beings who arrived from somewhere specific, ran operations here for their own purposes, and eventually left. The tablets don't just say where they went. They say where they came from. The word is Nibiru, and in Babylonian astronomical texts it has a real, documented technical meaning. The crossing point, a body that cuts across the paths of others. The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, recovered from the ruins of the library at Nineveh in the 1800s, gives Nibiru a fixed role as a celestial marker tied to the highest god. But other astronomical tablets, the Mull, a pin series, describe something that doesn't sit still. Something that crosses the sky differently than the other wandering stars, then disappears for a long stretch of time. For decades, mainstream Assyriologists have leaned toward one simple answer: Nibiru was just another name for Jupiter in certain contexts. Zecharia Sitchin, the Russian-born Israeli scholar who spent decades working directly with Sumerian and Akkadian texts, argued something far bigger. He proposed that Nibiru wasn't Jupiter at all. It was a separate, undiscovered planet, on an extreme elliptical orbit that swings it into our solar system roughly once every 3,600 years, before flinging it back out into deep space. He called that orbital period Ashar. And he pointed out that 3,600 is a number the Sumerians treated as sacred, a core unit in their base 60 mathematical system, the same system that still gives us 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle. On this planet, Sitchin claimed, the Anunnaki lived. When its orbit swung close to Earth, they came. When it swung away, they left with it. To be fair to the critics, and this channel always tries to be, Sitchin wasn't a trained Sumerologist, and several of his specific translations have been challenged by scholars with deep expertise in Akkadian philology. That's a real and legitimate criticism, and you should know it exists. But here's what mainstream academia still hasn't explained: why a Bronze Age civilization was writing down astronomical data centuries, sometimes millennia, ahead of the rest of the world. That question is still open, and it's the reason this theory refuses to die. Here's the part of this story that isn't ancient at all. Completely independent of Sumerian mythology, modern astronomers have spent the last decade hunting for an undiscovered planet in our own solar system. Not because of clay tablets, because the math demands it. Out past Neptune, in the icy debris field called the Kuiper Belt, a cluster of small objects have orbits that don't make sense under the gravity of any known planet. Something massive appears to be shepherding them. In 2016, Caltech astronomers Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown published research proposing a real ninth planet, not Pluto, several times more massive than Earth, on a stretched, elongated orbit that could take it as far as 500 to 600 astronomical units from the Sun. With an orbital period estimated in the range of 10 to 20,000 years, a massive planet on a long, looping orbit, spending most of its life in deep space before swinging back toward us. Nobody at Caltech is citing Sumerian tablets in their papers. They don't need to. Two completely separate paths, one written in cuneiform 5,000 years ago, one calculated on a whiteboard in 2016, are pointing at the same kind of object. That convergence on its own doesn't prove Sitchin was right. But it makes the theory a lot harder to laugh off than it used to be, and the search isn't finished. The Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile is currently conducting the deepest sky survey ever attempted. If a ninth planet exists, and it's on the inbound half of its orbit, researchers believe this new survey has a real shot at finding it within the next few years. For the first time in this theory's history, we may actually get an answer. If something the size Batygin and Brown describe ever did swing close to the inner solar system, it would not be a quiet event. A body several times the mass of Earth passing anywhere near us would drag on planetary orbits, fling debris and comets inward, and could plausibly disturb tides and axial stability on a massive scale. In other words, from ground level, it would look exactly like a catastrophe. And the Sumerian flood account doesn't read like ordinary rain. The oldest versions describe darkness covering the Earth for days, violent winds, water rising from below the ground as well as falling from the sky. That is not a description of a rainstorm. That's a description of something disturbing the entire planet at once. Flood stories like this one show up in cultures on every inhabited continent, a detail we've gone deep on in earlier videos on this channel. Geological evidence does support major catastrophic flooding around 12,000 years ago at the close of the last ice age. Mainstream science attributes that to rapid ice sheet melt. The Nibiru theory offers a different trigger. Neither one has been proven. Neither one has been ruled out. Now here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. If you take Sitchin's 3,600-year cycle seriously and count backward, The intervals land on some of the strangest turning points in human history. The Bronze Age collapse around 1600 BC. The sudden rise of Mesopotamia's first true cities near 5200 BC. The abrupt end of the Younger Dryas around 8800 BC, a climate shift so fast that Greenland ice cores show temperatures jumping 10 degrees Celsius in under a decade. Not a century, a decade. Climate scientists still don't have a fully satisfying explanation for how fast that shift happened. When you lay a 3,600-year interval over these events, one after another, it stops looking random. It starts looking like a pattern. And if the pattern holds, the next window lands right around our own era. This is the question that fuels every corner of the internet obsessed with this theory. If Nibiru is real and it's due, where is it? The honest answer is, we don't know, and that's exactly why the story hasn't died. Multiple online predictions have named specific years: 2003, 2012, 2017, 2023, and every single one has come and gone without incident. That track record matters, and it's fair to be skeptical because of it. But there's a more grounded possibility. If a planet like this exists on the orbit modern astronomers are calculating it may currently sit somewhere between 400 and 800 astronomical units from the Sun, so far out and reflecting so little sunlight that no current survey could detect it even if it were sitting right where the math predicts. That's exactly the gap the Vera Rubin Observatory was built to close. Full sky, maximum depth imaging, running for years, specifically capable of catching a faint, slow-moving object that every previous survey has missed. If it finds nothing, that doesn't kill the theory. It just means the object, if it exists, is farther out than expected, or on the far side of an orbit that won't bring it close again for centuries. If it finds something, the conversation about the Sumerians changes overnight. Strip away every interpretation, every disputed translation, every argument between Sitchin and his critics, and one plain fact is still sitting there. Undisturbed, the first literate civilization on Earth spent an enormous amount of its energy tracking the sky, and specifically tracking something they called the planet of the crossing. They didn't say they calculated their way to that knowledge. They said it was given to them by beings who arrived from somewhere else. Whether that's mythology dressed up as memory or memory dressed up as mythology is still an open question. And for the first time in human history, we actually have the technology to start closing it.